We back for the severe setup, episode 11 or 12. I think I've lost count already. I can't.
11, 12, 13, 14, some of them.
Who it doesn't really matter. We're back as we always are every week for the setup. Going to take a look ahead to this weekend's UFC Atlantic City card and take a peek at the London card that's happening for Cage Warriors as well this weekend. A couple of bangers on that one too. So we're getting hot and heavy ahead of this weekend for MMA action. And we're going to begin, like I said, at Atlantic City. Aaron Blanchfield, man on Fiorot. Going to discuss that today. Vicente Luque, Joaquin Buckley is your co-main event. We'll spend a few moments of that. We could not go without talking about Rhys McKee's and Caelan Loughran's big fights this weekend as well. Before we jump over to talk about Vucenic, Lonnie Kavanagh, De Silva, and Diana as well over on the Cage Warriors card. Harry, let's crack on to it. It's an absolute belter of a fight in the UFC Atlantic City main event. One that I cannot wait to see. You know, you have two established contenders here in a style of fight here that we don't often get to see in the UFC. Normally we would have maybe Blanchfield put on ice to be the next challenger, maybe Fiorot put on ice to be the next challenger, but you know, the way things have been structured, Valentina Shevchenko, Alexa Grasso obviously lined up are in the tough household doing their thing right now. It sets this up for a number one contendership fight, and what a fight it is.
I agree. Look, I mean, in an ideal world, we wouldn't need to have this fight, and this fight happens for a title, right? Let's say one of them goes, bless you, by the way. One of them...
I had to finish real quick there because I had to sneeze, sorry.
If one of those fighters comes in and does a fantastic job against the champion, whether it would be Alexa Grasso or Valentina Shevchenko, if they come in, win the title, and then they'd probably have to fucking, defend it against that same person again, and then they come in and they fight for it. But, we are where we are. I think that what this does do is it cements one of them without a shadow of a doubt that this is the number one contender. And after the tough finale and after that showdown between Grasso and Shevchenko, we will see whoever wins this fight coming out and fighting the then champion. I don't then want to see, regardless of the result between Grasso and Shevchenko, I don't want to see another fight between them. I want to see whoever wins this fight go ahead and fight for the title. I couldn't be more impressed with Erin Blanchfield over the last little while, both seemingly her maturation as a woman, but her maturation as a fighter as well, her becoming akin to the spotlight, really learning to develop into that spotlight and rounding out her skill set so that she can go and compete at the highest level. Her performance against Jessica Andrade was illuminating, frankly. And I think Manon Fiorot is the perfect fight. If we're talking, forget the title, forget everything, we just want to see the right tests at the right time, then I think Manon Fiorot is a really, really, really good test for Erin Blanchfield right here. She's tough, she's rangy, she can crack, and she can also do a little bit of the grappling. And so if I'm Erin Blanchfield, if I go out there and beat Manon Fiorot, regardless of whether it's convincingly or otherwise, in your heart of hearts, there is nobody in that division that is more deserving of a title shot than you.
100%. And I think, the challenges are ahead of both women heading into this. Obviously, the challenges that Fiorot has to kind of come in and tackle in this fight is obviously the takedown, the grappling of Erin Blanchfield. I think until she faced, Fiorot faced Leah McCourt in her first fight. It was her only defeat in her career. I feel she hasn't been really tested with the quality of grappler. Jennifer Maia, not too bad, but I think Jennifer Maia is quite beatable for a person like Manon Fiorot. I think Erin Blanchfield does possess something different and will possess different challenges for Fiorot. What stands out in her game, Harry, that, Fiorot is really going to have to be focusing on and trying to get the better of in this fight?
I'm going to answer with something that's not a great answer, but is the thing that excites me the most. I don't know necessarily what Manon Fiorot is going to have to look out for in Erin Blanchfield's game, because in the last 4 fights specifically, we have seen Erin Blanchfield come out and do completely different things. We have seen the head movement get better. We've seen the jab get better. We've seen the level changes get better. In her first couple of fights in the UFC, she would rush fighters to the cage and then work cage takedowns. She would put her chin underneath her partner's jaw, and then she just dragged them to the floor and beat them up that way. When we saw against Molly McCann, we saw her do a little bit of the standing. We then saw her, take the fight down and hit a beautiful Kimura sequence from a crucifix. No problem. We then see her come out most recently against Jessica Andrade and just beat the brakes off Jessica Andrade, right? Just a wonderful performance all around. Didn't need the takedowns as much because she just looks so good on the feet. And so against Manon Fiorot, I think one of the most difficult things if you are Manon Fiorot is you are an established fighter. You know what your fighting style is. At this point, we are merely adding incremental experience attributions to your game. We're not making giant leaps and giant progressions. It feels like Erin Blanchfield is still doing that. And so obviously open cage wrestling, we're going to need to be very, very aware of. We're going to need to be aware, especially if there has been an improvement in the footwork game of Erin Blanchfield, that we don't find ourselves behind that tram line the tram line of death as we talk about in that octagon. Because if that is the case, we are being put against the fence and we are in a world of trouble if we do get put down on our back. And so I think for Manon Fiorot, the jab and the side-to-side footwork is going to be absolutely imperative. This is 5 rounds, so we don't need to rush, right? If we can drag Erin Blanchfield into the later rounds, if we can try and work on those legs, if we can try and work on that gas tank, we might be able to even this stuff out as the fight stretches on.
Yeah, I'm very, very curious. In some ways, I look at this as somewhat a clash of styles. I don't feel that Erin Blanchfield is going around to play around too much on the feet here. I think she's going to want. We don't know, but I'm going to speculate. You don't like to speculate. I'm definitely going to speculate. I love it. I think if it, maybe we can label it as like if we were to give advice to who would be listening to us really, but if we were to give advice to both of these fighters coming in, I think for Blanchfield, with someone like Manon Fiorot, why play around too much on the feet with someone who appears to have more power than you and that can hurt you? I think you try and close the distance. And I think both of these women are going to want to try and push the pace and bring it into the latter stages because both of them are unsure how, they will be in the latter stages. And that's something that we don't know. We haven't seen Erin Blanchfield compete in the championship rounds, nor have we seen Manon Fiorot. Unless that one with Rose, was that over 5 rounds or 3 rounds? That was
3.
Yeah, it was 3 rounds as well. So both of them are going into kind of uncharted territory in this one. And I think, you got to go back if you're Manon Fiorot here. You got to go back to Chuck Liddell, baby. You got to just sprawl and brawl. You got to keep this distance. You got to keep it at the distance that you're comfortable with. Use that jab and absolutely any chance that she has, she's got to hammer home strikes. I would feel that Fiorot definitely has the power advantage. I'm very curious to see who has the strength advantage between both women, and I think that will be the key to the winning and losing of this fight. And I could probably take by the way you're pointing at me, you kind of agree with that last assessment, Harry.
Yeah, I'm just really interested in the physicality difference, like size difference, strength difference, pushing power difference.
Yeah,
the mix up in the clinch, like who's got that better physicality? Because when I saw Manon Fiorot against Rose, the size difference, just body to body, was illuminating. Now, Erin Blanchfield is certainly not a small fighter, and we know that her game is based on her physicality, on her aggression. She uses her body very, very well, and so I'm really interested to see how that actually stacks up. Is Manon Fiorot as imposing as I expect her to be, or is Blanchfield going to be able to be the more imposing fighter? Because I agree completely that Manon Fiorot needs to keep this on the feet, obviously, right? Manon Fiorot needs to hammer in those strikes, obviously. But I'm more interested to see that as and when, over those 25 minutes, I would be very, very shocked if there wasn't a grappling exchange. And when we see the grappling exchange, what does Manon Fiorot do? Because is she able to impose her game? Is she able to drag it up and make it into a Muay Thai clinch type grappling exchange over a more traditional cage wrestling exchange? Or are we going to see her suffer the same fate that every other of Erin Blanchfield's opponents have suffered?
Yeah, it's the thing. I think the answer to that question is probably yes, but how long can she do it for? Can she maintain it over the course of the fight? And very, very excited to see. That's a fantastic fight that we're seeing. Co-main event, obviously, look at hanging over this co-main event, Harry, is the disappointment that we don't get to see Vicente Luque take on oh god, his name escaped me, Sean Brady, which was the fight that fell through on this card. Joaquin Buckley steps in to take on Vicente Luque. Obviously, Buckley is coming off of a good win over Alex Morono in his last fight. What do you make of this one? You're not too keen on this one, given what we were kind of chatting about before this fight. What's your assessment on this fight, and who do you think is going to get the upper hand?
So it's mostly a shame because we don't get to see Sean Brady fight.
Yeah.
Right? Like that's really where I am with this.
Yeah,
it's no offense to either Vicente Luque or to Joaquin Buckley, but I was just so excited to see Sean Brady come. Also intrigued to see Sean Brady come back and to see what he brought to the table. I thought Vicente Luque was a fantastic matchup for him to test where he is coming back. But Joaquin Buckley is certainly a difficult out for Vicente Luque in that he's got big power. He's starting to learn how to properly counter grapple rather than just use his athleticism and use his size. And for Vicente Luque, I think if we'd have had this fight 4 years ago or 5 years ago, I'd have heavily been picking Vicente Luque. Now, as we see Vicente Luque start to slow down, start to age in his career a little bit, I am much less convinced that Vicente has what it takes to finish this fight with a win. But he's a tough bastard in Vicente Luque, and he can do the grappling, and he's dogged in that style, and he hits really hard, and he's happy to exchange. I just don't know whether that's enough against a powerhouse like Buckley.
Yeah, I think what you said about Joaquin Buckley, and he's learning the ability to kind of disengage in the grappling, or to, I feel with Buckley and what we see with a lot of fighters of his stature and his build, they rely a lot on their strength to strengthen themselves out of those positions. But obviously we've seen Buckley do that and then get wicked tired at the end of a fight. So I thought Buckley did very well in his last fight. Against Morono, against a guy who is a tricky guy like Vicente Luque. And it's like you're getting like a somewhat of an Alex Morono 2.0 here in Vicente Luque, which was just better, just slightly better in all different areas here. And I think the experience of Luque, I think the way he fought against Rafael dos Anjos will be similar enough to what he'll do here against Joaquin Buckley. I don't think Vicente Luque is going to be too interested in getting involved in too many exchanges. I think that's where the winning and losing of the fight is going to be for Joaquin Buckley, to be honest, is similar enough to what we were talking about Fiorot. You create that distance, you try and land those big strikes. We've seen Vicente get a little bit chinny in recent times. And, look at, he's my favorite fighter that ever existed, Vicente Luque. So I'm up for it. We'll see what happens against the young and hungry Joaquin Buckley in the welterweight division. You're leaning? What? I know you don't like making picks, but who are you leaning towards in that one?
Buckley decision, I think.
Yeah, that's a fair assessment. The fight to go all 3 rounds, if you're looking to put some money down, I think would be the way to go there. I think if you're looking to put down some money on Rhys Mckee and Chidi Njokuani being an absolute banger, bang by name, bang by nature, and Njokuani coming in here, it's a huge moment for Rhys Mckee, though, Harry. I've talked about this on the Owl Triangle. I'll break it down again. And my overall assessment of Rhys Mckee and what we've seen so far of him inside the octagon is that we've only seen flashes of the capabilities of Rhys Mckee for one reason or another. We've seen him come in and having to fight after getting hurt and coming from behind. He can't do that in this fight. And I feel that if we get the Rhys Mckee that we've seen and his rise up through Cage Warriors and the Rhys Mckee that we have seen inside the octagon in spells for the full course of the 15 minutes here, this is a very, very winnable fight for him. And I'm very, very excited to see how he gets on. A solid matchup against a good, solid opponent. Moving down, it has to be said, to 170, Chidi is. But a huge moment for Rhys Mckee. The biggest fight of his career, in my opinion, without doubt.
A must win. An absolute must win. If he loses this, the UFC are not going to match him fairly from now on. It will be 4 straight losses. That's it. We're going like we are really struggling here. I think the key to this fight for me, Mjoukani is a very long fighter, which I actually think will suit Rhys because he can take a slight step out of range. He won't have to put himself in as much danger in order to land the shots that he wants to land. But I think that the real winnings and losings of this fight will happen in the first minute and a half. If Rhys can get started, if he can pump the jab out, if he can land his low kicks, if he can land the teeps, he will start to build up a rhythm. And Mjoukani will start to leave openings as he overextends in the pocket and really looks to get himself into the pocket. Obviously, Rhys also needs to keep this fight standing. I don't think if he's on the floor for extended periods of time, that's good for him. Off his back, he's never been the most clinical submission artist.
Would you not think he would be somewhat, capable of taking this fight down himself? Now, you don't want to end up on bottom, okay? That's fair enough, but you want to see him kind of, initiate the grappling, take Chidi down, put him on his back, which, even the threat of that, and I think I'd like to see Rhys threatening that from the get-go, because that's going to open up his striking, and like he's got power. We just haven't seen it yet inside the octagon, and this is tailor-made for him to go out there and put Chidi away, in my opinion. But I think the key is to opening up the striking, is to create that with level changes, with actually actively engaging in a clinch or maybe trying to take this fight down. We got to remember Chidi has fought a lot at middleweight at 185. He's moving down to 170 now. You got to test that gas tank, because I can guarantee you that Rhys Mckee is going to be in there at the end if we do go 15 minutes, and he is going to be the fresher fighter of the two. So yeah, very excited. Any other final thoughts on this one, Harry?
Do we know that Chidi's going to make weight?
We do not. And I think that's a common conversation. Obviously, we're going to talk about Caelan Loughran in a minute. We don't know whether what Chidi is, and we don't know whether Caelan's opponent Pacheco is, who's also fighting down as well, which is a little bit of a worry. And fingers crossed, nothing goes wrong there. But would you be, obviously you're talking about, you're not a fan of weight cutting as it is, like, and Chidi has his back against the wall here, so he's going to be fighting like a wounded animal here as well, isn't he?
Well, my fear for this, right, is Chidi Mjoukani struggling at middleweight, is not getting the results that he wants, and he's like, fuck it, I'll cut an extra 15 pounds, which is not a small amount of weight at all. That's 7 kilos, right? So to drop another 7 kilos in order to get down to welterweight, what does that mean he's ballooning back up to, even if he makes the weight? What does the physicality look like? What does the power look like? Does it transfer down? How much is he killing himself? Is that going to be fantastic for Rhys because the gas tank is just destroyed? Does that mean he's coming out like a bat out of hell and Rhys has to survive a really tough first round? And then, do you know what I mean? Like, there's just so many.
Yeah.
When it comes
we have to create this scenario here where he tries to cut down and realizes halfway through that he's not going to make it, and just says fuck it and comes in at maybe 173, 174 as well. And then now Rhys has dealt with a predicament where, Chidi might say, I'm going to save myself the energy here, lose 20% of my purse and come in as fresh as I can for this fight. Then the ball is in Rhys's court. And we've seen this time and time again, where, your fighter is kind of forced into taking a fight like this where they never should. And if he doesn't take the fight, he'll be also in the bad books of the UFC. So it's a bit of a fucked up situation. We've gotten fierce negative about this fight altogether, but I think it's, I wasn't expecting to go down that road altogether, but
sorry.
No, it's all good, but it's, I think, legitimate conversation that we have. But look it's all going to plan. Both fighters make weight. I think let me ask you a question. If this fight played out entirely on the feet, you see that Rhys Mckee getting his hand raised after that?
I think he finishes in Mjoukani if it stays on the feet.
Yeah. Yeah. And if you're in Rhys McKee's corner, are you telling him to shoot for the takedown? Are you telling him to level change to open up that? Or are you just telling him to trust the jab that he has and just depend on that big right hand that he has as well?
Yeah, I mean, obviously it all depends on what happens in the fight. But I think at the end of the day, I would never tell a mixed martial artist to not do mixed martial arts. And so I agree with your assessment completely that if he sees an opportunity for a takedown, then take him down, right? Shoot for the takedown, force him to grapple, especially if that weight cut's been tough on him. Get him to carry a weight a bit, right? Get him to try and let himself drag himself up a little bit, right? Let him try and get up. Let him try and push himself and really exert the energy and build up the lactic acid as he tries to drag himself back to his feet, and then just take him down again, right? Like, do your best to drain a man that is already draining himself. You know what I mean? And
Indeed.
so, yeah. Don't get me wrong. I mean, I would not say to Rhys, don't shoot a takedown if you see it and just stay on the feet. Always. If you see the takedown, shoot for the takedown. But yeah, I would like to think that Rhys has enough here, and if he doesn't, we got a problem.
Yeah, indeed. I think this is a winnable fight for him. I think it's a huge fight for him, and hopefully he's getting the result that he is looking for. Moving on to Loughran versus Angel Pacheco in the bantamweight division. Another big fight for Caelan. I don't think there would be as much pressure on him in certain terms as there would be on Rhys, but I know that from speaking to him on the Ultra Angle this week that there is a lot, he's putting a lot of pressure on himself. He needs to go out there and prove that he belongs. And I think he's got the perfect dance partner to do that. And I think it has to be mentioned here, there is a worry about Pacheco fighting down at 135 for the first time in his career. Hopefully nothing goes wrong there, but all going to plan and both fighters make weight. I think this is a very winnable fight for Loughran. I think that, he can go out there and really put on a show. How do you feel about this one?
The UFC know what they're doing here. They know what they're doing. There is a fighter who lost on his Dana White Contender Series, and they're saying, oh, you want to fight? Well, you have to cut an extra 10 pounds and you're fighting Loughran. And so that fighter says, yeah, absolutely no problem. I'll be there. No stress. And he goes and he gets on the treadmill immediately. And Loughran is just licking his lips at the idea of this sort of fight. And does it go well for Pacheco? It remains to be seen, but it certainly didn't seem as though Loughran was suffering from too many of the UFC jitters. Obviously, it's going to happen, right? It's absolutely going to happen. It's impossible to say that it wouldn't have happened, but he went out against a very, very, very good fighter and tried to give the best account of himself possible. And, fair play to him. I think this specific matchup is one where, remember, he's on American soil, right? On a pay-per-view, not on a pay-per-view, sorry, he's on a card in front of a stadium, and I would expect him to go out and get probably not a quick finish, but a good finish.
Yeah, I think the key to Caelan is Caelan getting a win here. I can't talk tonight for some reason. The key to Caelan getting the win in this fight is pressure, is backing Pacheco up, and is using body strikes, trying to drain that gas tank and using his grappling to just absolutely smother and sink Pacheco. And I think if he does that, and I think he has more than the capabilities to do that as well in this fight, I can see an early stoppage here for Loughran, if I'm being honest, and I'm not being too biased there. I've assessed Pacheco, and I think his weaknesses are where Loughran's strengths are, and I think Caelan has that level of fight IQ and belief in himself to go out there. I mean, Caelan talked to us on the Ultra Angle about having to sit on this loss and having he had people coming up to him and saying, "Hey, you're in the UFC right now, and when's your next fight? And did you win your last fight?" And he said it's been really difficult for him to kind of fester the thoughts of telling people that he was defeated in his first fight. It didn't sit well with him at all. It was his first professional defeat as well, so that obviously lights a fire under his ass as well, to kind of come out here and prove that he belongs in the octagon. He also went over and did some work with Henry Cejudo over there in Arizona as well, and picked up some good tips, some good advice, and built that confidence. He said he had to build the confidence where everybody has that sense of doubt if you do lose. But I asked him, do you have to go out there and prove that you belong in the UFC? And he said, I don't have to go out there and prove anything. I know I belong in the UFC. And I think the performance that we're going to see on Saturday night from Kaelan is going to be one of him staking his claim in the UFC bantamweight division, and I'm looking forward to seeing it. Any final thoughts on this one before we move over to Cage Warriors?
Paint me excited.
I love it. I'm really looking forward. Look at with Reese and with Kaelan, fantastic representatives of Irish mixed martial arts. It's brilliant to see them in the UFC. And I mean, as an Irishman that loves MMA, I live for nights like Saturday night. I live for it because I'm fighting with those boys, even though we have to kind of stay even keeled and everything like that. I'd be lying, and I think any Irish person who does cover mixed martial arts is lying a little bit if they're saying that they're not fighting in there a little bit with the lads that are going in on Saturday night. So forgive me if that is unprofessional, but that's the truth. Moving on, Cage Warriors London, just a couple of fights that we will discuss on that card. Another banging card here. Cage Warriors are really banging them out. In the main event is the fight that we're going to cover, the main and the co-main event here. I mean, we could cover a lot more, but we're a little bit tight for time. Jordan Vucenic is back. He's taking on Simeon Diana. And, anytime this man is in the cage, Vucenic, Harry, is a time I'm going to be pressing on the remote control and I'm going to be tuning in because, this guy is legit. And, we've been shouting from the rooftops of why Paul Hughes hasn't signed for the UFC. Why hasn't this guy been snapped up for the UFC yet? It's baffling. But I think you go out there, perform well against Diana, get another finish. I think, we're coming into contender series kind of season as well. I might be looking at that if you're Vucenic. But your thoughts on this fight, Harry?
If this isn't putting Jordan Vucenic in the shop window to go and either be immediately signed to the UFC, which is what he deserves, alongside Paul Hughes, I don't know what we're doing. I just don't know what we're doing. What more does Jordan Vucenic need to do? Do you know what I mean? I don't know. If Morgan Charrier has done enough to be signed to the UFC, I understand there were circumstances. He was signed for the Paris card. I understand he's got a big following, whatever. But that shouldn't stop somebody of the skill level of Jordan Vucenic or Paul Hughes, for that matter, being signed to the UFC. I think Ian Dean will know what he is doing here. I suspect Diana has been brought in, one, to give Vucenic a good fight, but to give Vucenic an opportunity to show off. And I suspect that's what he will do here. I thought Vucenic looked absolutely amazing against James Hendon. And I suspect a very similar type of result here. On home turf, on home soil, all of his crowd with him. It feels like this is we are selling the Jordan Vucenic story on Cage Warriors, and our aim is to push him on in order to get him to the UFC so they can bring in the next wave of 145ers.
Yeah, indeed. Very good assessment there. There's not too much to add there. It's like you're going out here, you're coming against your home crowd. He'll have the crowd in the palm of his hand in the Indigo on Saturday night. It is on Saturday or is it on Friday? It's on Saturday. Yeah, and I'm looking forward to seeing it. And I mean, I almost have to take a breath here. Lonier Kavanagh versus Sean Marcus de Silva in the co-main event in the flyweight division. Harry, this fight, I would say if you're not wanting to watch too much mixed martial arts and you're to pick one or two fights, you have to tune in because you're watching the future mixed martial arts with either one of these guys. And I'm a huge Lonier Kavanagh fan. He hasn't been competing enough. I'm so excited to see him back in there. He signed a new deal with Cage Warriors. This is... I'm surprised this isn't for a title, to be honest. Is there a flyweight title in Cage Warriors right now?
There is.
Who has it?
He lost it to Shaj Hack.
That's right. So I would imagine that the winner of this fight will be the next in line and the number one contender. When it comes to these two guys' skill set, Harry, we were talking next level shit, really, aren't we, with both of these gentlemen?
So I think for Lonnie Kavanagh, the question mark is the grappling. There is absolutely no question mark in the striking whatsoever. He is slick, he is quick, and he is so powerful when he cracks. I think the big thing I would like to see, and I don't think we're necessarily going to see it with De Silva, who's another really exciting stand-up fighter, but I would like to see with Lonnie Kavanagh somebody that is good enough to not just get blasted out of there, right? But is then good enough to test him in the grappling realms. I want to see what happens when, like I said, I don't need somebody that is going to stand and bang with him and is better than him in the standing. That's not necessarily the test that I need to see right now.
Yeah.
The test I need to see right now, bearing in mind, he's still only 5-0, 6-0, right? He's a baby in his career still. I would like to see Lon Kavanagh put in after this fight. If it is Shadchak, then fine. If it's not Shadchak, let's go and use Ian Dean's vast network of knowledge and go and find someone that is able to ask some grappling questions of Lonnie Kavanagh. Let's see him on his back. Let's see him get up. Because remember, like you say, this is the future of mixed martial arts in the UK. And so let's round him out and make sure that he has the requisite skills that when he does either fight for a Cage Warriors title and then have his opportunity to look at the UFC and or other promotions, that he is absolutely ready to do that. We talked about... Go on.
Go ahead. No, go ahead. I think like when you're looking at tests here, you have a fight down the card and a guy that I really fancy as well in Tom Creasy, who is, you know what I'm saying? And he's fighting Amir Malik Kapoor. And I think, you know, you could match up the winner of those ones. Maybe that's me. I get a bit excited sometimes. I just want to see Lonnie Kavanagh compete for a title. I want to propel his success and speed up his success. But obviously, you know, we got to be patient, and so does he. Like, I mean, that's like the level of talent in the flyweight division in the UK and Ireland right now, Harry, is absolutely ridiculous. There's some crazy up and coming talent at 125 in the Irish amateur ranks and coming into the professional ranks as well. And I think it's going to be fully on show. But you know, I wanted to mention Tom Creasy because I was really impressed with his last performance as well, when he went out there and took on Anders Sanchez, you know, who's a tough guy, and got him out of there. You know, we could be looking at maybe this being the number one contender for the number one contender fight between De Silva, Kavanagh, and between Creasy and Malik Kapoor as well. I'd love to see a tournament happen at 125 in Cage Warriors. I think there's enough talent there coming through. And obviously we've got Ireland's own Ger Harris is in that division as well. So
Savage.
Business is a booming in the 125-pound division in Cage Warriors, isn't it, Harry?
One thing I will just ask of Cage Warriors, if you are listening, and if you are, fair play to you for putting on so many wonderful shows, I would love to see a rankings. I would love to see a roster. And I understand it's difficult because one of the things that Cage Warriors do is they will bring a fighter in to challenge X fighter or Y fighter or whatever it is. But if you have, even if it's just a roster of signed fighters that are signed to multi-fight deals, I would love to see an up-to-date roster, because when you and I are thinking about matchmaking, when you and I are thinking about discussing fighters, it's very difficult for me to say, well, actually, Tom Creasy is going to be in line for a Lonnie Kavanagh type fight should he win on Saturday night, because he's ranked 6 and Lonnie Kavanagh's ranked 4, let's say. Do you know what I mean? And that's just something that Cage Warriors don't have
in between that, Ian Dean could work his magic as well and just find some other hidden gem in Europe or somewhere too. And yeah, it'll be interesting to see. But look, that breaks us down. UFC Atlantic City, a lot of Irish interest on that card. Cage Warriors London, I mean, top talent from the UK and Europe fighting on that. That's going to whet. If that doesn't whet your appetite heading into this weekend for mixed martial arts, I don't know what will. We'll be back next Tuesday on the Balance Breakdown. We're going to pick the best of the Atlantic City card, and we're going to pick the best of the Cage Warriors London card, and we're going to break those damn fights down. Until then, enjoy the action this weekend at BJJ_Harry Powell. I say underscore. It's not. There's no underscore.
It is. Yeah.
Underscore Harry Powell, and at O'Neill MMA. That's the Severe Setup. We'll talk to you next week.